Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Brian's Horror Corner, and welcome to this horror movie review as part of my 31 Horror Movies in May series. Today, we're going to jump back into the realm of horror anthologies. I've had a couple so far in this series. For this one, we're going back to the Amicus days, and in fact, the very first horror anthology movie put out by Amicus, which is Dr. Terror's House of Horrors from 1965. So yeah, this is I own all the Amicus. Well, maybe not all of the Amicus. Certainly not all the Amicus movies, and maybe not even all the Amicus anthologies. But a lot of them I do, and I've seen a few of them before seeing this one. There's still a few I have to watch yet. So someday I'll do like a top 10 or my order of my favorite Amicus anthologies specifically because they do have a very unique tone to them. But yeah, let's just go ahead and get into the review for this movie. Dr. Terror's House of Horrors from 1965. So, this is going to be a little different. I'm going to give you the setup and the premise, um, but mostly of the framing story and of the movie. But then I'm going to give you the cast and I'm going to go through each of the individual stories. There's five stories within this movie, besides the wraparound or framing story. So I'm going to kind of take each movie on its own with the cast of that particular segment. And I'll go through all that, and then I'll get into my thoughts and review, which will be spoiler free per usual. So, Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, a 1965 British horror anthology film from Amicus Productions, directed by veteran horror director Freddie Francis, written by Milton Subotsky. It was the first in a series of anthology films from Amicus. It is also the first horror movie film from Amicus. So not only is this the first anthology from Amicus, it's the first horror movie period from Amicus. So we're really going back here. So basically, the movie opens with five men entering a train carriage in London, bound for a fictional town of Bradley. They are joined by a sick and mysterious Dr. Schreck, who's played by Peter Cushing, whose name he mentions is German for terror. During the journey, the doctor opens his pack of cards. Tarot or tarot? I think it's tarot. That's how I pronounce tarot cards, which he calls the House of Horrors, and proceeds to reveal the destinies of each of the travelers. This provides the framework to tell the five horror stories. So yeah, there's five guys besides this Dr. Shrek. They each kind of get their own story as he's basically reading their palm or doing their tarot reading. That's how we get the five stories. So it's a very interesting setup and premise. So the first story, and these do all have titles to them. The first story is entitled Werewolf. Architect Jim Dawson, played by Neil McCallum, returns to his old family home on a Scottish Isle to make renovations for the new owner, Mrs. Biddulph. Biddulph explains she bought the secluded home to help her recover from the death of her husband. So yeah, Neil McCallum is Jim Dawson and Ursula Howells is Deidre Biddulph. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Biddulph. So that's the cast for that particular story. And then the next story is called Creeping Vine. Bill Rogers, played by Alan Freeman, and his wife and daughter, Ann Bell and Sarah Nichols, return from their holiday to discover a fast-growing vine in the garden. So yeah, Ann Bell is Ann Rogers, Bernard Lee is Hopkins, Alan Freeman is Bill Rogers. Then the third story we have is called Voodoo, where Biff Bailey, played by Roy Castle, is a jazz musician who accepts a gig in the West Indies and foolishly steals a tune from a local voodoo ceremony. This one has Roy Castle as Biff Bailey, Kenny Lynch as Sammy Coyne, and Harold Lane as Roy Shine. And then our fourth story is called Disembodied Hand. Pompous art critic Franklin Marsh, played by Christopher Lee, seems more concerned with his own devastating wit than art itself. So yeah, Christopher Lee is Franklin Marsh and Michael Goa as Eric Lander. Michael Goa, yeah. And then our fifth and final story is Vampire. Dr. Barb Carroll, played by Donald Sutherland, returns to his home in the United States with his new French bride, Nicole. So yeah, in this one we got Max Adrian as Dr. Blake, Jennifer Jane as Nicole Carroll, and Donald Sutherland, a young Donald Sutherland, as Dr. Bob Carroll. So you probably noticed I didn't give you too much. I just wanted to kind of give you the premise for each of the stories. I didn't want to go too far into them as far as what happens. In part because I'm trying to avoid spoilers, but for this particular anthology movie review, it's also just easier to do it this way. So now I'll go ahead and get into my thoughts and review on the movie, starting with my pros. So as I said, I hadn't seen this movie before. I've seen Asylum, I've seen Beyond the Grave, and even though technically it's not an Amicus film, I've seen The Uncanny with Peter Cushing from the late '70s. There's some debate about what people consider Amicus anthology horror anthology movies and what they don't. I think but for sure there's seven at least. And I've seen. Well, this is the third one I've seen. I still have four more to go. I still have to see Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror, Torture Garden, and The House that Dripped Blood, I believe, are the other four yet that I know are specifically Amicus horror anthologies. But as far as this movie goes, I enjoyed it. It's not quite on the same level as Asylum for me. And I have to watch Beyond the Grave again. I would probably put it on the same par with Beyond the Grave. It might be a little. I might. It might be a little bit higher, but I have to watch Beyond the Grave again to be fair. I do like the framing story pretty well in this movie. I mean, it seems simple enough. You have five guys on a train, these random strangers that meet each other, and then a sixth guy mysteriously shows up and he has these tarot cards and basically what she calls his House of Horrors, thus the title, Doctor Terror, um, or Doctor Shrek. So it's a simple enough premise, but I like the way how it leads into all five stories. It all ties together pretty well. The ending of the framing story is really got a nice, fun, and kind of creepy twist to it, but it's not necessarily the most unpredictable thing ever. Wait a minute, did I say that right? It's kind of predictable is my point, but still, it's still fun and enjoyable. Sorry, my mind is working all day. But anyway, so as far as pros go, obviously you have to start with having Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, and Donald Sutherland in this movie. I mean, those are three world class actors right there to begin with, and obviously Christopher Lee would do a lot of Hammer films, and Peter Cushing was a staple for Amicus and just about all of the Amicus, if not all the Amicus horror movies, certainly the anthology movies. And those three are at the top of their game in this movie. They really bring a lot of gravitas to this movie. Great performances by all three of them, and really by the other main characters as well, the other two gentlemen on this train that I'm not quite as familiar with. Um, I guess Alan Freeman and Harold Lane. Or no, Roy Castle, sorry. Roy Castle and Alan Freeman, I believe. Um, they all do a good job. So yeah, the performances make this movie work. That's the biggest thing, especially those main three that I listed. And like I said, I really enjoyed the framing wraparound story with the five strangers and the tarot cards being read to each of them. That gives us the five individual stories. You know, some anthology movies they'll just kind of they don't even have a wraparound story. Or if they have one, it's just kind of lame and they'll just throw stories at you. Usually it's somebody just telling a story around the campfire. So I kind of enjoyed the creativity involved in how we get into the stories here. I thought it was really fun and clever. I thought the movie was really well directed by Freddie Francis because it has great pacing throughout it. All the stories I can say that obviously I have my favorites and ones that are less favorite, but they all have good pacing through them. There isn't any of them that I felt like they were rushing through or was very slow or anything. I think they were all paced really well, and that's not common for anthology movies, especially when you have five stories like this, five different stories. So that definitely the director definitely gets credit there. Um, and there's some pretty good payoffs as well, at least in three of the stories, I'll say. As far as like twists or payoffs go, to kind of take us out of that story with a little bit of a kind of a deal. So I thought there were some actually effective, creepy moments and scenes in most of the short stories, particularly Werewolf, Disembodied Hand, and well, mostly those two. I guess maybe Vampire to a certain extent. Um, maybe Voodoo to a certain extent, but definitely Werewolf and this Disembodied Hand had some nice creepy moments, more fun than scary, but definitely a good job of making creepy moments there. Also the end of the whole framing story, the end of the movie. There's a twist that I really enjoyed at the end of this entire movie with the five guys on the train. I thought it worked out pretty well for the most part. I really liked it. Um, so as far as talking individually about the stories, I really enjoyed the werewolf, the disembodied hand, and the vampire the most. If I had to rank them, I'd probably say of those three, werewolf was my favorite, then disembodied hand, and then vampire in that order. I thought they all three had effective performances by the cast, and they had fun twists and creepy moments. That's really the best way to sum those three up. And then, so yeah, those are kind of my pros for this movie. As far as cons go, some of the practical effects used haven't aged very well. Obviously, it came out in '65, so it was either made in '64 or '65. They just couldn't do a lot back then. I mean, they do use practical effects, obviously, but they just didn't quite have the creativity or the ability to do some well-looking practical effects. So some of the things look kind of silly, especially a vine growing in one of the segments, and even the disembodied hand. You can kind of tell is fake, and the bad effects in the vampire segment. But it's the '60s, so we're going to give them a pass on that. At least I am. Um, so the two stories that didn't hit quite as well for me were Voodoo and Creeping Vine. I think they're less effective stories for me, kind of forgettable, not as impactful, especially Creeping Vine. I think they bit off a little more than they could chew. It's an interesting premise and idea, but because they can't really do the effects with the vine, you basically just have a vine that somebody's clearly moving behind somebody in one of the scenes, and it's just not scary, and it just doesn't look very good. Voodoo was a little bit better. Both of these episodes, by the way, are a little bit more. I don't know. Voodoo is certainly the most comedic of the five stories. They throw some more comedy in there, as well as some physical follies and things like that. And Creeping Vine's just more of a lighthearted, sort of silly premise kind of story. Where the other three, I mean, you could say they're all kind of silly in this particular, as tends to be, but the other three just work better, I think. So if I had to rank all five stories, it's Werewolf is my favorite, then Disembodied Hand, Vampire, Voodoo, and Creeping Vine is my least favorite of the five. And then finally, some of the wraparound story, maybe it was just me or my TV, but at the very beginning, before they got on the train car, at the very end, it was hard to kind of see what was going on. It wasn't the best shot movie in terms of from a visual standpoint. Now, again, it was made in the mid '60s, so, but still, I also don't think the editing was the greatest, especially at the end when you see Doctor Death, or Doctor Terror, and all of a sudden it just cuts to the credits in the same sort of scene. I don't know. I just thought they could have done a better job editing. But again, a lot of my cons have to do with the time that it was made. I still really enjoyed this movie. It's definitely, I'm glad to have it in my collection. It's definitely a great Amicus horror anthology movie, even though it's not quite on the level for me as Asylum. I still really enjoyed it, and I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Um, as far as the rating goes from a horror anthology and horror movie in general standpoint. Is it overly scary? No, but that's not really what Amicus films were intended to be. They're more fun. They do more good storytelling, and then of course you have class actors like Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, and in this case Donald Sutherland as well. They really raised this movie up. Um, so yeah, 8 out of 10, and really enjoyed it. I'm trying to think if I have anything else to say. No, not really. I'm looking forward to seeing the other Amicus horror anthologies. I'm not sure when I'll watch them, but I'll definitely watch them and see where they're. But if I had to rank the three right now, I think Asylum would be one. This would probably be two, and then just a notch below that would probably be Beyond the Grave of the three that I've seen, but that can always change. So, 8 out of 10. Go ahead and comment down below, guys, if you've seen Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, the Amicus production from 1965. What you think of it? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Why or why not? Please like this video and hit the little notification bell down below so you don't miss any of my videos coming up for this series. And please make sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of my great horror content that I have coming out throughout the rest of this year and beyond. So That's it for this review. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day. Stay scared. Bye.